Genesis 3:15 says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and he shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel." Well, if you're joining us in reading through this 25-day reading plan, today's reading is Genesis chapters 3, 8 through 15, and I would encourage you to read that passage. Now, we don't know how long Adam and Eve were in the garden before they sinned, and honestly, there's no reason to speculate on the length of time. The story is relevant if it was 1 week or 10 years between their creation and their sin. And while the purpose of the story might give us insight as to our passions, the result of the story gives us insight to why the world is the way it is. In God's judgment of the serpent, who really was Satan in disguise, he pronounces a judgment that will be a death sentence to the serpent and pain to the woman's seed. Now, Eve clearly understood this, as there is significant evidence that she believed that she thought Cain would be the savior. I'd like to concentrate on something that gets overlooked quite often. Christ was not born for several thousand years after Adam and Eve, and if you take a reasonable dating of the events in Genesis, after that fall. Christ was not born during Noah's time. Christ was not born during Abraham's or Isaac or Jacob's time. Now, he wasn't born during Moses' time or David's time, but he was born at a time when the world was ready for his entrance. Herod tried to kill Christ prior to his growing to a man. Throughout Christ's ministry, people tried to harm him, but it wasn't until Pontius Pilate was in Jerusalem that was at the time ready for Christ to die, be buried, and resurrected. Everything God does, he does in his time. Now, my father used to regularly say that he was born 100 years too late. And by that, he meant that he thought that he would be better in the 1800s than he was in the 1900s. But that wasn't God's timing. My father was born in 1910 and he died in 1968. Now, while God knows things are going to happen, he doesn't let us know. The reason for this is clear. If we knew the future, why should we live for Christ in the here and now? Why wouldn't we just bring Christ into our lives shortly before our death, thereby ensuring that we would spend eternity with God? Prophecy is to let us know what is going to happen, not when it is going to happen. Prophecy gives us hope. Prophecy gives us something to strive for. Prophecy allows us to see a part of the mind of God without overwhelming us in all of the mind of God. God's judgment on Satan, Adam, and Eve just was spelled out, the fact that he would redeem us through a relative of ours. He didn't tell us when, and he didn't tell us how in the first revelation. But what he did say assured Adam and Eve, as well as Satan, that judgment was coming, and that a human and not an angel had the right to rule the universe.